Someone just paid $12.5 billion for a basketball team. The Los Angeles Lakers sold this week for a record $12.5 billion, the most anyone has ever paid for an American sports franchise. And here's the wild part. It happened barely 14 months after the team last changed hands at a record price. The buyers are a former Hollywood chief and a young tech investor. This is KnowFlo Daily. Good morning. It's Thursday, August 13th, and here's what's on the front page. 4 quick ones, then we'll dig in. Top of the pile, inflation cooled again. Consumer prices rose 3.4% over the past year in July, down a notch from 3.5% in June, and month to month, they barely moved. It came in exactly where economists expected, and it's a big enough deal that we're coming back to it as our main story in a minute, because of what it means for interest rates, and honestly, your wallet. Google pulled the cover off its Pixel 11 phones on Wednesday. 4 of them, from the standard model up to a Pro Fold, on sale August 20th, starting at $899. That's $100 more than last year, though you now get double the storage to start. The whole pitch is something called Gemini Intelligence, AI that Google says can do tasks on its own, like booking a ride or ordering groceries while you get on with your day. Pre-orders are already open, with some hefty gift card deals attached to sweeten it. If you were up north on Wednesday, you might have caught a bite taken out of the sun. 26 states plus, Washington saw a partial solar eclipse, while the full shadow swept across Greenland, Iceland, Spain, and Portugal. New York got about 9% coverage, Toronto and Montreal caught it in the afternoon, and Alaska got the best of it stateside, with Fairbanks at around 35%. In Iceland, the total eclipse lasted the better part of a minute over the capital. If you missed it, the photos coming out of Reykjavik are absolutely worth a look. And on Wall Street, Goldman Sachs is buying an exchange-traded fund manager called NEOS for as much as $2.25 billion. NEOS runs about $30 billion across 19 income funds, including ones tied to Bitcoin and Ether. The deal closes early next year and pushes Goldman's fund business past $130 billion in assets. It's the second fund manager Goldman has snapped up this year, so they're clearly building a serious position in that market. Now to the story every trader was watching the clock for this morning. That July inflation report finally gave the market something to cheer about. But there's a strange knot sitting right underneath it, and it's worth pulling apart. So here are the numbers. Consumer prices rose 3.4% over the past year, cooling a touch from 3.5% in June. Month to month, prices barely budged, up just 0.1%. And the core figure, which strips out the jumpy stuff like food and energy, eased to 2.5%. Every single number landed right where Wall Street expected. The big reason was energy. Brent crude slipped, and gas at the pump dipped in July. Though fair warning, gas has already crept back up in August to about $4.04 a gallon, so this bit of relief could be short-lived. And one thing worth saying plainly, cooling inflation doesn't mean prices are falling. It just means they're climbing at a gentler pace than before. For most households, things still cost more than they did a year ago. Still, markets liked what they saw. The S&P 500 nudged up to 77.49. The Nasdaq gained about 0.5%. And here's the part that really matters. Traders now put a 62% chance that the Federal Reserve holds interest rates steady in September instead of raising them. Before this report came out, that bet was basically a coin flip. A hold would keep pressure off mortgages, car loans, and credit cards, which is exactly why everyone was glued to it. But here's that knot I mentioned. At the very moment prices are calming down, American companies are pouring money into artificial intelligence at a scale that's honestly hard to picture. Spending on the AI build-out is expected to hit $581 billion this year alone. That's almost 2% of the entire US economy, and Goldman's researchers think that share only climbs from here, maybe to nearly 3% by 2028. Globally, the figure could approach $1 trillion. And here's the twist. Despite all of that money, an Atlanta Federal Reserve survey found that about 90% of executives say AI hasn't actually boosted productivity at their companies yet. A separate census survey found only about 17 to 20% of businesses are even using it, and it's mostly the big firms, not the corner shops and small employers. So put it all together. You've got a once-in-a-generation spending boom that isn't yet showing up in what companies actually produce, and it's feeding an economy the Fed is still trying to gently cool without tipping it into a slump. If AI eventually delivers on the productivity promise, it could genuinely help bring prices down for good. If it doesn't, well, that's an enormous pile of money chasing a payoff that hasn't arrived. And that's the tension in a nutshell. The soft inflation number is the good news the market wanted. The AI question is the one nobody can answer yet. Closing that gap is the puzzle everyone, from the central bank to the corner office, is trying to solve right now. For today, though, the takeaway is simpler. A September rate hike just got a lot less likely, and that's why stocks ticked up. On to our main stories. And a heads up, the numbers only get bigger from here. Let's circle back to that Lakers sale, because the details are staggering. $12.5 billion, agreed to by former Disney boss Bob Iger and venture capitalist Josh Kushner, whose firm Thrive Capital has backed OpenAI, SpaceX, and Spotify. It's the richest sale of a sports team in North American history. And here's the kicker. The seller, Mark Walter, only bought control of the Lakers about 14 months ago at what was then a record $10 billion. So on paper, this team gained roughly $2.5 billion in value in a little over a year without winning a title in between. A bit on the buyers. Kushner is 41, a billionaire, and yes, the younger brother of Jared Kushner. He already holds a stake in the Miami Heat that he'll have to sell off to make this happen, since you can't own two NBA teams at once. Iger, of course, ran Disney for the better part of 2 decades before stepping down earlier this year, and he joined Kushner's firm not long after. And it isn't just basketball doing this. On the very same day, fresh figures put the Dallas Cowboys at the top of NFL valuations at $15.5 billion. That's the 7th straight year they've been number one, and 9 NFL teams are now worth $10 billion or more, even though the Cowboys haven't made the playoffs in 2 seasons. As a whole, the 32 NFL teams are worth a combined $299 billion. The takeaway is pretty simple. Sports franchises have quietly turned into one of the hottest assets on the planet. There are only so many of them, they almost never come up for sale, and the very richest people on earth keep deciding they want one. Scarcity plus ego turns out to be a powerful combination. And for fans, it's a strange feeling. Watching the team you grew up with trade hands like a skyscraper or a tech startup for sums that would have sounded made up just a decade ago. In pharma, drug maker Eli Lilly is heading to court. It filed 6 lawsuits against companies selling knockoff versions of retatrutide, an experimental weight loss drug that's still being studied in clinical trials and has not been approved by the FDA. Here's how that even happens. Promising trial results set off a craze on social media, and telehealth shops and online peptide vendors started selling their own copies anyway, often made by overseas manufacturers. The trouble is, selling an unapproved drug like that breaks federal law, and nobody is checking the dose or the purity of what buyers actually end up injecting. Lilly named vendors with names like Astropeptides and Lone Star Peptide, filing in courts in California and Texas. One Lilly executive called it an enormous global problem, and admitted 6 lawsuits won't fix everything, but said it's a start. And you can see why they're worried. When a drug is still in trials, the company controls the supply and the safety data. Once copies show up online at a fraction of the price, that control is gone, and so is any guarantee about what's actually in the vial. This is really a preview of the fight brewing around this whole new generation of weight loss drugs, where the demand is running miles ahead of what's actually been approved and tested. And in tech, the company behind the Claude chatbot, Anthropic, says it'll start stamping invisible watermarks on the text its AI produces. The marks are readable by machines, but not by people, and they're meant to satisfy a new European Union law on AI transparency that took effect on August 2nd. The company says the watermarks travel with the text when you copy and paste it, can survive some editing, and won't change how the writing looks or feels to a person. It's rolling out worldwide, not just in Europe, across all of the company's models and products, showing up both inside the text and as hidden data in generated files. It's a small preview of where a lot of this is heading. More and more AI content is going to carry a quiet label baked right in, whether you notice it or not, so that platforms and regulators can tell what a machine wrote versus what a person did, and that matters more than it might sound. As this stuff gets better at sounding human, being able to trace what came from a machine is going to be a big part of fighting fake reviews, fake news, and impersonation. Europe is moving first here, but where Europe writes the rulebook, the rest of the world usually ends up following. All right, time for the lightning round. Quick hits before we wrap. Russell Westbrook is calling it a career after 18 NBA seasons. The 9-time All-Star and 2017 MVP walks away as the league's all-time king of the triple-double, with 209 of them. Only Oscar Robertson ever averaged 1 across a full season, and Westbrook pulled that off 4 separate times. Crypto.com is now letting users in Europe trade tokenized versions of 1,500 US stocks and funds, from Apple to Nvidia, starting at just $1 and trading around the clock. The catch: you don't actually own the shares or get any voting rights. You're only tracking the price. It's part of a bigger push by crypto exchanges to blur the line between digital tokens and old-fashioned stocks. Speaking of central banks, Japan's wholesale prices jumped 7.2% in July, staying hot enough that markets now expect the Bank of Japan to raise interest rates in September. A weak yen is making imports pricier and feeding the squeeze. It's a neat mirror image of the US story, where our central bank is thinking about holding while theirs is getting ready to hike. A quick one for the space fans. A radiation vest tested on NASA's Artemis 1 moonshot could one day shield astronauts from solar storms, those bursts of particles that make deep space so dangerous for the human body. It's a small piece of gear, but a potentially huge deal for anyone heading back to the moon and, eventually, onto Mars. On a lighter note, Chick-fil-A is taking its chicken and waffles sandwich nationwide on August 24th. Picture a maple waffle bun, a chicken fillet, applewood bacon, and honey butter with a side of syrup. There's a breakfast size in the morning and a bigger one after 10:30. And McDonald's is dropping one of the more unexpected mashups we've seen in a while. Starting August 18th, Happy Meals come with 8 toys pairing Hello Kitty and her friends with Godzilla monsters. Think Kuromi dressed up as Mechagodzilla or Karapi as King Ghidorah. The brand's own strategy chief called it one of the best toy collections they've ever done, and if you know any adult collectors, don't be surprised if the drive-through line looks a little older than usual that week. That's the rundown for Thursday, August 13th. Inflation is cooling, the Lakers are worth more than most public companies, AI is soaking up hundreds of billions with the payoffs still to come, and your Happy Meal now comes with a tiny monster. That was KnowFlo Daily. Sign up for your personalized newsletter at knowflo.io. News picked for you, your local news included, free.